The HR arm, is very heavily female dominated. So are ERGs, right? So it's the women who are noticing how people are really connecting. And a lot of that work is always being done for free. And I actually think it should be paid, for one, but also it's the most valuable work that we're doing out there, because that's how people are really connecting.
Hello. In today's episode of Mama What's Next, we're talking about the future of work. Not just as a trend, but as a lived reality for women and how to navigate it. My guest today, Nola Simon, is a future of work strategist and hybrid work futurist who's been advocating for flexibility long before the pandemic made it mainstream. In this conversation today, we explore why return to office mandates are really happening, how trust is breaking down at work, and why women, especially caregivers and multi-passionate women, are being pushed to redesign work on their terms. This episode is about agency, self-trust, and preparing yourself for 2026 without waiting for anyone's permission. Hopefully it's really helpful to you, and enjoy today's episode.
Stop the battle within your soul. You know it's all in your head. Being sad doesn't make you smart. It seems your heart just needs a fresh start.
Nola, I'm so excited to have you here today with me. We're going to talk about the future of work for women, for mothers, and what we're moving to, because you are a remote work futurist, but also you are a LinkedIn top voice 2024-25. I'm really happy you can share some of the learnings and the trends and where you see work going. So welcome to Mama What's Next today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Nola, it's interesting for people to see what kind of background you've come from and how you moved into this very interesting space of guiding companies and people towards meaningful work and how we can connect better. How did you find your place here?
So I'm in Canada. So I'm 45 minutes north of Toronto, and I've actually always lived in a small town north of Toronto since I was a baby. And I come from financial services. So I work for a global insurance company who also happens to own a bank. Toronto traffic is around the worst in the world. My commute actually grew to be 2 hours one way. My kids were born in 2005, 2007. And by the time they were school age, it became challenging for me, if something happened during the day, to get home to them, right? So it was a challenge, and we had limited family support. So that's where I started with hybrid remote. There happened to be somebody else that shared the same babysitter, and she worked in the same company as me. She had been there so long that what they had granted her was permanent remote. And so I went to my boss and I'm like, well, if she can do it, why can't we work out something? And that's how I started getting involved in pilots. This is all the way back in 2011. I started advocating for this. So by the time I actually left the company, I had actually transformed over to a fully remote employee.
I think that's very much a topic for women. Being able to work remotely just gives us women, mothers particularly, a chance to have some agency again in the kind of work that we pick, right? Mums sacrifice pay and the type of work that they do in order to be able to care for their families and to be a good parent, So I think helping companies and also workers achieve
some level of normalcy and something that we feel is very much, an integrated part of our lives is really important. So is this the kind of work that you're doing right now? Like, who do you work with and how do you support?
So the ideal is always organizations who are interested in supporting their employees better, right? So that could be government, that could be nonprofits, but it could also be like organizations, who just have a vested interest in wanting to support their female employee, actually any caregiver really better, right? So it doesn't have to be women, doesn't have to be parents. There are people who have to struggle with elder care as well too. I used to have a friend who, she had older parents who'd never really learned English. Her parents were Italian. And to get any kind of support workers to come in and be able to support them, she had to facilitate it because she was the only person who understood their medical history, and she was the only person who understood the language to be able to convey it, because it's a rare skill to have that support in the language you need it, right? And Canada is very multicultural, so that's not a unique thing. So it could be any company that's interested in providing support to caregivers. All of a sudden, there's this narrative that we're going to need fewer employees, that, AI doesn't need to work or sleep, or how does this integrate into work? Well, AI doesn't need to be in an office either because it's not real, right? Mm-hmm. So if we accept that that's going to actually impact how we work as well too, which it might, then it's our vested interest in how we make life and work more human, because the work that humans are going to do is going to be not the stuff that's transactional that AI can quickly pick up, right? So the work that humans do is relational. It's the compassion, the generosity, the wisdom that only humans can bring. But in order to bring the best of us so that we're performing that type of work better, we have to be happy. It's in companies' best interest to create conditions that employees are going to thrive in. And one of the ways that employees thrive is if they have the autonomy and the agency that you were talking about. We can make the experience of work for humans. Even if we're using AI to augment the work, that's how we can make it better. So it's not just what's happening in 2026, but where do we see this going? And what has to happen, because organizations have to rejig how jobs are done, what tasks are done, and what that work really looks like.
There was so much media coverage and so much movement pulling people back into the office, right? And there's a lot of, you shared an article around this as well, where that's coming from and why that's happening. Why is that happening?
So I want to pause here for a very quick moment. Because if you are listening as a woman navigating work and building meaningful work for the future, this part matters. What Nola is describing isn't just a workplace trend. It's a structural mismatch between how work is designed and how women actually live. The return to office conversation and the erosion of trust that she mentioned, the fear around AI, none of this is happening in isolation. And especially for many women, mothers, caregivers, and multi-passionate women like we are, the cost of pretending it's just business as usual is simply too high. What I want you to listen for in the rest of this conversation is this. Where do you still have agency, and what can you build in a way that works for you, and how? Because even if organizations are slow to change, you are definitely not powerless. And that's where we move to next, from waiting for permission to designing work that actually supports your life and your family. So let's continue.
What's happening with the whole return to office mandates that are so often in the news and the whole circular debate that's happening with that? It's really just companies are invested in commercial real estate. So the infrastructure is there. Like you said, it's a patriarchal society. So there is that perception of control from the top. So they're invested in commercial real estate. Their work has always been in person. So it's in part and parcel an identity thing as well. This is how I've been successful. This is how we think that work has to be in order to go forward. And we don't want to sacrifice our identities and that perception of power and control just because you need extra time and flexibility. We need to see you here in person because that's how we trust that work works. Honestly, it comes down to that investment in real estate as well, is if you accept that flexibility is the way of the future and that people are going to be working less in an office, what does that mean in terms of the value of commercial real estate? A $300 million building was selling for like $69 million. That's an incredible loss, right? So for a company to really come out with a narrative that says we accept that that's possible, what does that mean for their balance sheets? What does that mean for the way that they do business? What does it mean for their shareholders, their board? Because you have to remember, board members that are helping to make decisions and advise CEOs and whatnot all come from that same environment of this is the way the world always worked.
Hey, it's Mel here. Just a quick note for you. If you love this episode, hit subscribe. The women I talk to are building businesses and careers differently, without performing, without the constant content hustle. And they're sharing how they're actually doing it, building trust, sharing their expertise, and reaching the right people. And if this episode sparked something, share it. Send it to that friend who's building something beautiful, but staying way too quiet about it. And actually, if that's you, if you left corporate or a boring office job to do meaningful work, but the whole get on camera thing makes you want to hide, the sunny chapter edit that my agency is creating is definitely for you. We have one conversation where I help you position yourself strategically and ask you all the right questions. And then we turn that into multi-format marketing assets for you, social content, blog posts, all of it. So you can build trust and share your expertise and reach all the right people. No camera performance, just you being you, talking to me. The link is in the show notes if you're curious. All right, let's continue.
This is the way we think it should work. Very few board members really have that futurist perspective of if we accept that real estate isn't necessarily the key to the value in the future, whether we're looking 3, 5, 10 years from now, what does that look like? And how do we adjust to that? People aren't really having that conversation, right? But what I'm finding is people, like individual employees, and that includes leaders themselves too, are making decisions that get them closer to the flexibility that they need to support their lives and making those choices that's going to actually prepare them to do the work that's going to get them more in line with what they have to be. I mean, I did it. If you actually look back just even at my story, when I first started asking about remote work, we didn't have laptops, right? There was only a specific team in our office that had laptops. We all had desktops. So you literally had to be in the office to be able to access the computer. That's not the case now. The majority of staff obviously have laptops, right? They have phones, they have different devices that they can use to connect, right? But it's the policies and procedures and like the way that the organization is structured to be able to provide that work. Are your policies and procedures? I had to switch teams, because only one particular team was allowed to do any kind of remote connection into the office at the time. So I made the choice to switch teams, even though I enjoyed my team members. I needed the flexibility. You have to be very clear of your terms, right? People are going to start making those decisions to get more of the flexibility to provide the support that they need for their teams. It's for all this talk of collaboration, for all this talk of, the experience in the office is better. There are people who know that that's not true because their work isn't actually designed to be collaborative and you don't listen to them. There are so many studies that come out that say that trust is really eroding in leadership. And that's a critical thing. So employee experience is well down, trust is eroding, and then you add AI into the mix. And the narrative around AI right now is we can use this to eliminate headcount. So therefore, we don't need staff at all. That doesn't actually improve the trust. So now you've got this fear that's being introduced as well, too. right? This is how it's working currently, but I'm not sure what this is going to look like in a few years because I don't see that trust improving. So I think that unless organizations and leadership start to look at this and how behavior and psychology really play into it, they're going to find that it's very challenging to attract the best of the best if they continue with this return to office narrative. You've always had a central head office, but you've got branches around the country. Those people are working remotely together. And so the branch is in person, but the head office staff is working remotely to those branches, right? It's always been that way. It's really just what we've called it and the narratives that we've built around that, right? So if you don't feel as a leader that you can build those types of connections and collaborations, that's a skill issue. So you need to upskill because it's the way of the world. And if you're actually online stating that you cannot build connection that way, how do you think it's going to work with AI when it's becoming more and more asynchronous and it's just the opportunity to actually connect? It needs to be studied. It needs to be connected. And if you can't connect remotely in a world where connection like that is the norm, then that's a you problem. And then you start seeing layoffs, right? Because that's the other thing is that's where the trust gets undermined is, are people actually hoping for voluntary attrition when they make these announcements because their headcount is too large? And if people leave voluntarily, no severance is required, right? So that's where it's like employees who have discernment are looking at these patterns and seeing that the actions and the words don't necessarily line up with what the intent is and what the strategy is. So leaders are saying one thing and doing another. And that's all undermining trust. And that's not going to get better with this narrative around AI, with the potential of impacting jobs and headcount too, right? So what is your intention about workforce in general? How do you see work, the future of work, and how does that involve humans? It becomes a really essential conversation to have, because if your vision is to have maybe like to reduce your organization from 500 people down to like maybe you're hoping for 20 to maximize your profits, is that an organization where you see yourself being set up for success, right? Who are the people that you want to keep? And people are assessing this, which people always do because it's their livelihood, right? They pay attention to what leaders say. They pay attention to, the feedback that they ask for, and then how they take that feedback and enable it and action it. And what they often see is that they give all this feedback and then nothing happens. Nothing changes. And that's undermining trust. And so when you're constantly seeing this and it's a repeating pattern, are you going to make the decision to stay, or are you going to make the decision to get a different job, make different choices that's going to make you feel more secure, right? And people will do that, especially women. Women are really good at detecting patterns and communication in general, right? So women historically have been the community builders. Like if you look at the employee resource groups that are formed, a lot of times the people who are leading those types of employee experience situations, like the HR arm, is very heavily female dominated. So are ERGs, right? So it's the women who are noticing how people are really connecting. And a lot of that work is always being done for free. And I actually think it should be paid, for one, but also it's the most valuable work that we're doing out there, because that's how people are really connecting. So again, are you as a leader paying attention to the way that your organization actually works? Because there's the values, the mission, the statement, everything that you've crafted and you've put on paper, and you put posters around your office about how you want the organization to work. But what's the behavior on the ground? What's the real culture in your organization? Because culture is an offshoot of behavior. And are you actually living the values that you say run the organization, or are you actually living other values that play out in behavior? So the other thing that's interesting too about the way organizations work is a lot of times they're now bringing in fractional and contract people like me, and they're having these people work interrelated, right? So now you've got full-time employees, you might have some part-time employees, but you could have contractors, and then you could have people who are fractional. They're working on different types of contracts, right? How does that get managed? How does that all interplay? It becomes a really different thing because the contractor isn't going to want to attend your Ask Me Anything session because, well, you're talking about benefits that they're not eligible for, right? And they work in a different way than the full-time employees, right? So that's where it's like that whole collaboration piece is interesting because organizations aren't necessarily going to be just comprised by the full-time employees the way they have historically, right? There's more flexibility in how we're actually working with people and attracting people with the best, most competitive skills. That's the other aspect that I see for women in particular as well, too. You know, how do you build in that flexibility that you might need to when pay isn't really changing and companies aren't really promoting and everything is frozen and you still need more money because everything is increasing in cost because of tariffs and, you know, just the way of the world right now. That portfolio career where you can actually work online, you can get paid through a blog, you can work part-time as a community manager, you could do a part-time job like as a census taker, that sort of thing. It's all like you're building out a community, like a portfolio career where you have a central job, but you might be doing other things on top of that too. You're then CEO of your own business and full-time employment is just actually a part of it because there's no limit to the human creativity and imagination. And I think that's really what we need to not discount, especially like AI not only benefits organizations, AI benefits individuals, right? And we don't even know what that's going to look like, but the potential is there. The possibility is there. So how are you working with people who have assets and ability to walk away from you if the environment that you create isn't the environment that they need? They have options.
Is that where you see the future of work now going for women, particularly portfolio careers and build different income streams for ourselves?
Honestly, that's a trend that's been going on for a very long time. Like selling Mary Kay, that sort of thing that people have done on the side. And historically, it did tend to be women who would do those types of things because, it was like the parties and that social aspect and that community thing is how can you benefit from those types of networks and those types of relationships. This is an extension of that possibility has grown beyond just who you can actually host in a party in your living room on Saturday, right?
So it becomes the normalcy in the future because right now, especially as a corporate woman, I think it's still very much normal to have your 100%, that's what I'm doing, and your identity is kind of locked into that role and job profile, right?
Well, I think that is true, but it's also fear-based, right? Because, and it's the way the policies are designed, because a lot of times organizations, especially like large global organizations, have a lot of rules about, how you can have a second job, what disclosures you have to do, if there's any kind of conflict, right? In the organization I worked with, they had rules in place where they didn't actually want anything that was knowledge related. So like you couldn't go out and like sell insurance for another company, that sort of thing. But I worked with somebody, she was a photographer. She was in the communications team, always ran her photography business on the side because it had nothing to do with the main business of the organization, right? So she would take pictures of families and weddings, all that stuff, had nothing to do. And the organization had no problem with that, right? Because it was clearly something that she was doing on her own time, operating completely separate, had nothing to do with the reputation of the organization. So do I think it's possible for employees to create that kind of stuff and do that on the side? I think it's honestly a really good thing if you have the ability to do that, because she also got laid off. And with her, she started right away because that business had already had like a 10-year runway. And she didn't have any blip in income because she just went full time with the photography business and was able to actually be really successful. Right.
So building that alongside your normal role and as a strategy for the first few years, as a safety net, as a strategy into the future, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So when you're thinking about identity in your work and your relationship with your organization, I encourage people to run scenarios of, what happens if, right? So if you look at your organization, the organization I used to work with, they would do layoffs like every November. It was like clockwork. Is it likely at one point that I won't survive that? What does this look like, right? And run those scenarios. What does it feel like if you lose that? And how does it impact your identity? How does it impact your work? How quickly do you think you're going to be able to find another job? What does your network look like? Do you have an updated resume? Who would you turn to? Who would support you? Who would help you? And this is futurism. This is what I call everyday futurism. It's not that you're running like predictions. It's imagining what would happen if something became true, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're noticing trends, especially if you combine the trends, right? So for example, if you're seeing like the idea of portfolio careers and you're also seeing the idea of AI, and then you're also seeing the idea of organizations laying off staff. If you're looking at the convergence of all those three, create a scenario where you wake up one day and all of that has actually come true. What does it feel like? What does it look like? When you wake up in the morning, who are you living with? Who are you responsible to? Start to imagine it and start to feel it in your bones. And then you can start to see what options are maybe going to feel better for you as an individual. And then you can start to live that. It was actually a large scale scenario that the Futurism company that I studied with did. And they did it 10 years before the pandemic happened. And it was a scenario based on what would happen if there was like a global pandemic. And they knew from that there would be difficulty with masking. There would be difficulty with rituals. So like weddings and funerals, and people wouldn't want to stay home and miss that type of thing. That gathering instinct would become challenging, right? They knew from their scenario that they'd run that this would be a problem. And so, but they imagined that 10 years beforehand. So after the pandemic, they actually followed up with people who had been part of the scenario initially to see how they had handled the pandemic and whether it was stressful for them. And the people who had been part of the scenario, what they found was because they had imagined what it would feel like and how they would cope and what their reactions would be and, how they would influence and how it would impact their work, they coped so much better than people who had no idea that was ever coming, right? Yeah. They reported really positive impacts because they had run those scenarios. So you can prepare yourself for the possibilities of what you think the future might bring. And whatever that is, you can create that. You can imagine that yourself. There's no one right answer. It's just, what do you personally hope and believe and see happening? If you prepare yourself and it never happens, then oh well. But if it does, you're heads and tails above where you need to be.
Yes. You've just left us with the most amazing statement just right at the end. Also amazing advice for women looking to actually create change now in their work life and stepping into their next chapter. Thank you so much, Nola.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening today. And here are some of the key takeaways for you, just to recap the episode. So 1, stop waiting for work to go back to normal. Design your very own normal. The future of work isn't something that happens to you. It's something that you can actively shape. So ask yourself, if my job disappeared tomorrow, what would I want my work life to look like? Start moving toward that now, one small decision at a time. 2, treat flexibility like a strategy and not a request. Flexibility isn't a perk that you earn. It's a business advantage you can negotiate and build towards. Audit your actual role right now. Which parts of your work truly require you to be in a specific place and which don't? And use that clarity to advocate for yourself and redesign your role towards more flexibility. 3, build optionality before you need it. Optionality is the real safety net. One income stream means 1 point of failure. Many of you have maybe never thought of this before, but choose one low-pressure way to expand your income and skills this year. It could be consulting, writing, teaching, coaching, community building, or a creative side project. You don't need a side hustle. You just need some options. Number 4, practice everyday futurism and imagine before you're forced to react. Like we talked about today, you don't need to predict the future, but you can prepare for it. So just run a little simple scenario for yourself to think about it. What if my role changed, or my company downsized, or AI reshaped my role and my work? What skills, relationships, or income streams would help you feel more safe and more confident in your work? Number 5, trust your pattern recognition. It's a leadership skill. If something feels off at work, it very likely is. Women are exceptionally good at reading systems, culture, and power dynamics. So when you notice repeating patterns, disengagement, fear, unclear leadership, don't gaslight yourself. Use that insight to inform your next move and be prepared. Number 6, separate your identity from your job title. You are more than just one role, one company, or one chapter. Write down everything you actually do. Strategy, problem solving, caregiving, communication, leadership. This is your transferable skill set, and it travels with you wherever you go. Number 7, build self-trust the same way you build muscle, through small repetitions. Confidence doesn't come from certainty. It comes from taking action. So make one decision this month that prioritizes your future self, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable, because each aligned choice strengthens your self-trust. And remember, the future of work isn't about predicting what will happen. It's about trusting yourself enough to prepare and giving yourself permission to design, to redesign your work life in a way that actually fits your life and supports your family in the way that you need it to. Thank you so much for listening today. We will catch up next week. Have a beautiful week. Bye. All right. Hello. And I'm so grateful you were here today, tuning in and showing up for yourself. If you love this episode, can I ask for a quick high five? Yes, that's right. Just hit that subscribe button at the top and leave me a review and share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration today. Your support really means the world. Let's also give ourselves a big hug for showing up, being honest, and supporting each other on this incredible journey. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'd really love to keep in touch. Until next time, keep being the incredible real you that the world needs. I'll see you back here soon. Bye.